My name is Rachel, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to prove to my parents that I was worthy of love. Real love, not the transactional kind they reserved for my younger sister Ella. I was the daughter who paid the bills quietly, who brought casseroles to Sunday dinner, who sat beside Mom during her gallbladder surgery and drove Dad to every checkup. Ella, she was the glittering favorite, beauty queen in high school, drama major in college, the golden girl who never paid a cent of her own rent but always seemed to get everything she wanted. I didn't mind. Not really. I had my son, Mason, my anchor. My light. He was 10 when the seizures started. The first time it happened, we were in the grocery store. He was just reaching for a box of cereal when his body suddenly jerked and stiffened, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. I dropped everything and screamed. Paramedics came. Hours later, a doctor told me that Mason had a rare neurological condition that caused severe seizures, and that one of them could kill him if left untreated. "We need to operate," the neurosurgeon said. "Soon. The longer we wait, the more damage these episodes could cause." I didn't have the money, but thankfully, Mason's insurance covered it. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. What I didn't know then was that while I was researching neurosurgeons, fighting with pharmacies over meds, and sleeping in a plastic chair beside Mason's hospital bed, my parents were quietly making other plans. Plans that had nothing to do with Mason. They called me in for a family talk one morning, 2 days before the scheduled operation. I arrived at their house in sweatpants, still exhausted from another seizure-filled night, clutching Mason's new EEG results like a lifeline. Dad was already seated at the kitchen table, fingers steepled. Mom poured coffee slowly. Ella was there too, dressed to the nines, as always. Her nose, already small, was bandaged. She smiled like she'd just won the lottery. "What happened to you?" I asked. "Oh," she said with a breathy laugh. "Just a little rhinoplasty, preventative. The cartilage was deviating and the bridge had a bump. Dr. Glassman is an artist." I blinked. "Glassman? That's Mason's surgeon." Ella sipped her green juice. "He does cosmetic work too, really exclusive. Mom pulled some strings." Something inside me went still. Mom sat down. "Rachel, we need to talk about the insurance." My breath caught. Dad cleared his throat. "We canceled Mason's operation. Ella needed it more urgently." "You what?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom said. "Ella's breathing was compromised, and we've already rescheduled Mason's procedure for next quarter." "Maybe." "She could have paid out of pocket." "We didn't want to waste her savings," Dad said. "You know she's starting a wellness brand. That's her future." I stood there, stunned. "You used my son's insurance for a nose job?" "He doesn't even know what's going on," Mom said flatly. "He's young. He'll be fine." I started shaking. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ella shrugged. "Honestly, you should thank me. My photos are already going viral." I left without another word. My ears were ringing. I drove back to the hospital in silence, heart pounding, vision blurry. That night, Mason had another seizure. It lasted over 3 minutes. I thought I was going to lose him right there, in that sterile room under flickering lights. I called every hospital in the state, every clinic. I begged, cried. One assistant took pity on me and offered a partial payment plan, but it wasn't enough. I reached out to my parents again. I didn't want to, but I was desperate. Mom picked up. "Rachel, stop with the theatrics. Ella's healing, and we don't need you poisoning the air with your guilt trip. Why do you always make everything about you?" "You made it about you," I snapped. "You gambled with my son's life." Her voice dropped. "You need to get your emotions under control. It's embarrassing." And that was it. I stopped begging. I started planning. Because if they thought Mason was expendable, if they thought I would just lie down and accept that, they had no idea what kind of woman I had become. They took from my child. They were going to learn what it felt like to lose everything they built. And they wouldn't even see it coming. It started with silence. No angry texts, no threats. No social media rants. I just vanished from their family group chat. Didn't show up for Sunday dinner. Didn't respond to Mom's voicemail where she whined about how family doesn't hold grudges. I knew exactly how they operated. The moment you refused to serve them, you became disposable. Forgotten. But I wasn't the same Rachel anymore. While they lounged in Ella's influencer studio, gushing about lighting angles and protein powders, I was selling every possession I didn't need: my TV, my jewelry, half the furniture. I took on 2 side jobs. I barely slept. Every dollar went into Mason's private surgery fund, hidden in a new account they couldn't touch. It wasn't enough yet, but I wasn't giving up. I also found something else during those sleepless nights. Documents. Old insurance statements, electronic records. Proof that my parents didn't just cancel Mason's surgery. They forged my consent. I stared at the screen, trembling. Mom had signed my name. That night, I wrote an email. Not to a lawyer. To a journalist. Not some tabloid-hunting blogger either. I contacted a local health reporter known for investigating hospital corruption and insurance abuse. I sent her the full story, the medical records, the voice message where Mom laughed, "It's just a nose job, Rachel. Stop acting like he's dying." The reporter replied within hours, "Meet me. I want to hear everything." But that wasn't my only plan. While I met with the journalist, I also connected with an old high school friend, Amara, who ran a high-end event staffing agency. She remembered Mason, and when I told her what happened, she didn't just cry. She offered me something unexpected. "I can get you into their gala." "What gala?" She turned her laptop and showed me the invite. The Lumini Lounge grand opening. My parents and Ella had become wellness investors for a luxury spa/nutrition empire launching downtown. There'd be cameras, influencers, a red carpet, and a family values speech hosted by Ella herself. All funded indirectly by the insurance money meant for my son's brain surgery. That's when I knew what to do. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. By day, I worked. By night, I wrote down every instance of neglect, every cruel message, every transaction and document they signed without my consent. I compiled it into a digital file and uploaded it to a timed server, password protected, email ready. And then I waited. The night of the gala, I arrived in silence. Amara gave me a floor-length black dress with sleeves like armor. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just watched. There was Ella on stage, glowing under spotlights, nose flawless, teeth white, hands folded like she was a saint. "Our mission," she purred, "is to heal others the way I healed myself. Family is everything." Applause. I moved to the side of the room near the AV technician. 10 minutes later, just as Ella posed beside our parents for a photo op, I handed the tech a USB and said calmly, "Scheduled content swap. Last-minute sponsor clip. Play at 9:15 sharp." He didn't question me. The badge Amara gave me worked like a key. At 9:15, the lights dimmed. Ella gasped softly, assuming it was time for her before and after surgery slideshow. But it wasn't. Instead, on the massive screen above the crowd appeared a still photo of Mason, small, pale, mid-seizure, tubes taped to his head in a hospital bed. Then came a voice. My voice. A 10-year-old boy needed surgery, but his family canceled it for a cosmetic procedure. The woman in this room who boasts about healing, she stole from a child to fix her face. Gasps, phones raised, guests murmuring, my parents frozen. Then the recording, Mom's voice, laughing. "It's just a nose job. Stop acting like he's dying." Silence. Then the final image, a scanned insurance document with my forged signature. The lights came back up. Ella stood trembling. Dad's face went bloodless. Mom stammered something about hacking. It didn't matter. Security guards were already whispering. Cameras were still rolling. I left through the service exit. The article dropped 2 days later, front page. Mother's insurance canceled for cosmetic surgery. Son nearly dies. But I wasn't finished. Because that was just the first wave of my plan. They thought I'd disappear after the article. That I'd be embarrassed, that I'd ruined my own family and would come crawling back once the storm passed. But they didn't understand something crucial. I wasn't trying to ruin the family. I was removing a tumor. The fallout was immediate. The Lumine Lounge lost 4 major sponsors overnight. Ella's personal wellness brand got flagged by multiple regulatory agencies after the article revealed she'd promoted healing crystals while funding them through diverted medical accounts. Instagram shut down her account for fraudulent health claims. But the worst hit wasn't public. It was private. The insurance company launched an internal investigation. I didn't even have to press charges, they did. Forgery, misuse of medical funds, misrepresentation of guardianship. Mom was the primary signer. Dad was the witness. And I had one more gift for them. See, they had forced me to sign over joint custody of Mason years ago, back when I was still living under their roof, jobless, scared, just a teen mom begging for shelter. They used it as leverage. Let us help, but we'll need signatures to get him on our health plan. They thought I forgot. I didn't. With my lawyer's help and the forged consent now public record, I filed a permanent revocation of their custody rights. Mason was now fully mine. Every right, every decision, every protection. No one could touch him again. That broke them more than anything. They weren't arrested, but they were placed under a multi-year investigation. Their names ended up in state records. Their ability to invest in family health businesses? Terminated. But that still wasn't my revenge. That came later. Months passed. Mason finally got his surgery, thanks to a community grant sparked by the article's attention. He was healing. We were healing. Then, one day, I walked past a strip mall on the edge of the city. And I saw it. Oh, a dusty storefront with a for-lease sign. Cheap, run down, forgotten. Perfect. I signed the lease the next morning. Over the next 2 months, I transformed it, not into a shelter, not into an NGO, but into something far more specific. A respect education center. Not for adults, not for abusers, for kids. Kids like Mason. Kids who'd been humiliated for speaking too loudly, shamed for neurodivergence, told to bow, apologize, grovel, because elders deserve automatic respect. I built a space where children were taught something better, mutual dignity, boundaries, assertiveness, language for injustice, confidence to speak when they're mistreated, even by family. And the opening day, I sent a public invitation. To my parents, to Ella, to every person who ever said, "Don't make a scene." I knew they'd come. Not to support me, but to mock. Mom wore a fake smile. Dad leaned on his cane, shaking his head like the whole thing was pitiful. I waited until they sat down. Then I walked up to the small stage in front of 12 wide-eyed kids and their guardians. I held up a child's cup, plain blue plastic. I said calmly, "Once, a boy spilled juice from a cup just like this." His aunt made him lick the floor. And his grandmother called it respect. This center exists 'cause that boy deserved more. Not fear, not silence, not shame, but dignity. I locked eyes with Mom. She blinked, her jaw twitched. Then I turned to the wall behind me, where a frame hung beside the Respect Center's logo. Inside it, a photo of Mason's old hospital bed and a handwritten note from him. I know what real respect is now, and I'll never let anyone take it from me again. Mason, age 10. The room went silent. Dad stood and left. Mom followed, shaking. Ella never even showed up. And I smiled. Because I hadn't screamed. I hadn't fought. I hadn't even tried to make them apologize. I simply built a world where they no longer mattered. Where their version of respect had no home. And Mason? He stood beside me, taller now, scar on his head healing, watching his mother rewrite the meaning of power. Not with fists, but with truth, with dignity, with something they never expected.